everybody. Kimberly here again today. I've put up the video about the contest and the meetups and stuff. So now I'm going to try to talk about this dark night of the soul conversation that Paul wanted to have. And to be very honest with you guys, I don't really know how to start because it was never my intention to bring up something that is a very sensitive subject for people, to disregard how that feels. This is like there's a lot of ideas about what the dark night of the soul truly is. And I don't think anybody really could pinpoint a definition for like a general dark night of the soul definition. The way I'm feeling about it is that for some people, it could be a little bit of a nitpicky thing. For others, it could be very world changing, pull the rug out from under you. Everything around you is just not going your way. And the energy that I have around me right now is such that it needs to be discussed, but it's sometimes people just really want to walk on eggshells with it, and sometimes people want to get really into the dirt of it. Dark night of the soul for anybody is extremely personal. It can be felt as like a depression. It can be felt like you're drowning. It can be felt like your world is shaking apart. And I personally have been through, I guess, stuff like you would call it dark night of the soul. But I would never, ever compare my dark night of the soul to somebody else's dark night of the soul because it is just so personal. I once asked Paul in a channel, what does it feel like for, a spirit in heaven to witness somebody that they love and care about? What does it feel like as a spirit to see that? And he had told me at that time that it was like you were waiting in the waiting room while somebody that you love and adore was having life-altering surgery. And you're just waiting there because you can't get to them. You can't get to their bedside. There's nothing you can do because it's just like this separation from like the spirit guides and this person, although it's the closest they have ever been, right? Because while somebody's going through the dark night of the soul, the connection is just so, because it has to be, it's almost like this lifeline is being given to this person to draw energy from, the realms of heaven without even knowing that they're being supported. Because in a dark night of the soul, a person sometimes feels like they're the furthest away from spirit that they ever will be. And it can put people into like this really dark spiral, right? So that's why I'm not hesitant about talking about it, but I just want to tell people that, I understand exactly where you're coming from. And I don't take this subject lightly at all. And I'm getting red already, like it's crazy. It's But, you know, I think it's really important that we open the discussion, because the 26th, I think, was Bell Let's Talk Day. And I think this is very relevant. I feel like this is very relevant to also talk about as well, because the whole, you know, there's depression and stuff. And yeah, we need to talk about it. But when you're connected to your spirituality and you hear all these terms, right, it's very important to talk about this subject as well. So you know that you're not alone. You know that there are people that are feeling this exact same way, even though it's personalized, right? So Paul's saying that there are two kind of distinct ways that people try to find themselves in this whole spiritual way. And he's saying that one is religion and one is spirituality. One and the religious way is trying to find yourself through outside influences, outside forces, outside support systems, right? Spirituality, he's saying, sometimes is a way that people find themselves, but it's very internal. It's finding themselves while going really deep within. Finding yourself when you're connecting with spirituality, and not so much religion, because with religion, and religion is beautiful, all these different religions, but there's like this community of support with this. They kind of like think this the same way, they have the same beliefs. It's like a community of the same. Whereas if you're finding yourself spiritually, yes, there are people out there that can help you, but it's very personalized, just like the dark night of the soul. And when you're doing spiritual work to find yourself spiritually, this is when a person will have more of these episodes of what is termed as dark night of the soul, because it's not so much going outward and finding resonance outward in an external world. It's finding yourself, who you really are, deep within. While you're going deep within, there's a whole bunch of layers, or there's a whole bunch of muck that you have to sit through, and that's where the darkness comes in. And we had done a channel like a long time ago when I was just first starting these videos, and he was saying that the deeper you go, like you're taking like a scuba diving light, and you're taking your own light, and you're diving deep, and you're going through the darkness of your own emotional waters to find the treasures deep, deep, deep within yourself to bring up, right? That's sort of what a dark night of the soul really entails. He's saying the strongest people on the spiritual journey will have a few of these, what is termed as dark nights of the soul. And he's saying that there's a lot of different terms for it. Like some people call it the void, some people call it like the cave, you know, they're walking through the cave. Some people call it the dark night. Whatever it is, again, it's extremely important to understand that it is very personal, but it is diving deep to find yourself. And he's saying, just like Heath was saying, that like you're going through yourself like you would kind of like you're looking at the past life, like how you didn't, you got information that you were kind of an asshole in a past life. He's saying that when you dive deep, you're needing to dive deep to look at those kind of aspects in this life, what you've done, what's happened. Some people say what's happened to you. And okay, he's saying that we all live on this fault line, right? And he's saying that it is kind of like a precarious balance on the daily. It's like you're walking this fine line of saying heaven or hell. Sorry, I just hit my mic. So, like, usually we're all good, we're all keeping balance and stuff, but sometimes that line is tipped, right? And that fault line, it's not, you're not tipping over like some sort of walking the wire kind of high wire, it's a fault line. And when this dark night of the soul happens, your world is being shaken. He says the world is being shaken because you have come to a point in your life where what has resonated with you, what has fit, what has been the norm for you, you've kind of moved on from that. And now that just won't work anymore. And so your world kind of has to be shaken up, because there's more that needs to come in, but there's stuff that has to be shaken off to allow that to happen. So he says that the human life is built on all these fault lines. And once in a while, from within, he's showing me like a little seed being planted. And he's like saying, every time like a seed germinates, the earth around it is shaking, because every stage of a seed's growth is going to look different. A seed is not going to stay a seed. It's going to grow into this beautiful plant. So he's saying that when the seed is planted and it starts to germinate in every stage, it's the world around it is shaken up, and it has to be that way so it can bloom, right? That is the human existence. And it's very, very difficult for all these stages that people like need to shake things off. And he's saying that it's actually and this is no competition, we all have our place on this earth, but it's actually like the earth angels, the star seeds, the light workers, the really like high vibrational individuals that are doing the spiritual work, they will have more of these dark nights of the souls because he says, you're growing so fast. He's saying, you're growing so fast that all of this stuff, it's just so fast. It's so furious. It just all has to shake off so you can get bigger and bigger and bigger and bloom, 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 bloom. What comes with the dark night of the soul is new perspective. But we can't have new perspective in our life until we're able to shake off what no longer resonates with us. The earthquakes that are happening are shakeoffs. What is happening is that people are getting stuck in the rubble of what's not working anymore, the shakeups. They're getting stuck in all that rubble. He's like, what brought this on for me is that he's been getting a lot of messages, a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls, not literally like we haven't been getting a lot, but he's saying on his end about how people's worlds have just been shaken up so much for years and years and years. And there was one in particular where this person was like, I would trade places with you because where you are is better. He's saying that there's been a lot of 911 calls, spiritual 911 calls to heaven, because there's been a lot of shakeups with people over and over and over again. And he doesn't really know how to help bring people out of the rubble if they're so heavily addicted to staying in that rubble, because anything different would mean that they have to work on something of themselves. And when you're in the dark night of the soul, working on yourself again and again and again gets exhausting. And he completely understands how people would rather not, right? He says the dark night of the soul is to elicit change for the better. The dark night of the soul is not handed to people as a punishment. It's handed to people who are actually ready to get up and go. It's almost like a wake-up call. It's almost like, okay, you asked for this to happen, you've done the work. We have to shake your world up a little bit so you're able to shake off all of that stuff that you're holding on to and clear the path so you can go further, faster, right? He's like, the dark night of the soul is a rapidly increasing amount of energy within and around a person. Okay, he's saying that he's showing me like tornadoes, and he's saying that a lot of what the dark night of the soul isn't people just sitting in some sort of pity party. He's saying it's actually a tornado of healing chaos. The tornado being what is being whipped off. Okay, he's saying that the dark night of the soul is actually like, if there are tarot readers out there, it's actually like tower moments over and over and over again. And it's the 10 of Wands energy where the tower moments, so the tower comes down and he says, but people are lugging around the shit that has come down from the towers. And that's where people just feel so inundated with all of this shit that they have to put up with. And he's saying that because people are carrying around a whole bunch of stuff that was whipped up from these healing chaos tornadoes, it's actually blocking and sheltering them from their connection with spirit. He's saying a dark night of the soul is actually like the poem Footprints, where Buddy, and he says that he's used this example a lot. He says, Buddy is walking on a beach, and he says during the hardest times, there was only one set of footprints, and he thought he was walking alone, whereas the good times, this person was walking and there were two sets of footprints. And I think he was praying to Jesus or something. It's been a while since I read the poem. He says people are so inundated with carrying around what no longer works for them in these dark nights of the soul times, that they're blinded. They can't even see how much of heaven is around them and holding them up. He says the message he would like to get to people is that during the dark nights, a person is the most surrounded by heaven, by love, by their spirit guides, by angels, than they could ever dream of. He says, I'm not exactly doing this sit down session with Kim to talk about the definition of a dark night of the soul. He says he's gotten so many phone calls, so many emails about the heaviness that people are feeling, that he needs to bring the message about that they are not alone. They are not alone as much as they think they are. He's like, if you just drop the baggage from the past, you would have a clearer picture of what is actually going on. He says he'd like to talk about Tesla. He said Tesla was a man who was extremely high vibrational. And with that vibration that he carried, he could bring a lot of logic and spirit together. Oh, he says Tesla was actually on the same level as the Buddha. But he said if you looked at his story, he had really low times and he had really high times. And he was taken advantage of so much that he died alone and impoverished, and he was stolen from. he's like, so a lot of these individuals from the past that you see, like the roller coaster of what they went through, those really like huge down moments were learning points of what needed to be let go of to do something differently. Tesla was so Tesla was so addicted to making this planet like just tossing it like way into the future, that he didn't have proper boundaries. Oh, and he lugged around a lot of hard feelings from what had happened to him, what was stolen from him. He kind of had this huge victim mentality. The victim mentality is something that's very interesting. He's saying that like the high vibrational, so when you're in a dark night of the soul, you're actually vibrating actually quite high. And he's saying, how do I put this? When you're in the throes of a dark night of the soul, your vibration is actually just jumping, and moving really, really fast. And so it's so fast that people get really, really scared, and they hang on to all of that stuff that's happened to them in the past, kind of like a receiving blanket of comfort. And it just gets so inundated and so much to carry that at some point they have difficulty trying to find their way out of that. He says he hears you. He wants you guys to know that he absolutely 110% hears you. What's confusing, he says, is that people try to define something that cannot have a human definition around it, such as the dark night of the soul. He says it's dramatized. Sometimes it's not taken seriously. Sometimes it creates this feeling like you aren't heard, or you're ignored, you're put aside. And he says it only takes one thing to set off a chain of events that would, he's like, it's kind of contradictory, because he's saying that when a dark night happens, a person is ignited and rocketed to a higher plane of existence while feeling like their whole world is falling apart. He's saying, but take a look at rockets, take a look at spaceships when they take off. And he's talking about NASA, not like the UFOs, but he's talking about the NASA, like the space rockets. Just think about how much shaking, movement, the smoke that comes from the bottom when I don't even know what that's called, when they say ignite, and then the rocket takes off, and it's just this huge spectacle, and you can see it from Cape Canaveral, you can see it from miles away. It is so much of this powerful explosion for people. So you're getting ready to take off really fast. And he says he wants you guys to know that when you are propelled into taking off so fast, you will feel like you're in the dark of it, the dark night, which is very, very contradictory. He said it would probably contradict what people are saying or thinking or putting out there. But in actuality, it is the most combustible time of a person's existence. And there will be more than one, right? Sometimes he says it would take 3 months to get out of, and sometimes it will take 3 years to come out of. He says, I want to make myself perfectly clear. If someone is going through a dark night for a couple of years, he's saying it isn't an every single day feeling like shit kind of thing. He says it is very, very up and down. You'll get like the highs and the lows. He says, but the highs will be very high and the lows will be very low. And he said, sometimes that's very difficult for somebody to get a grasp on. The very highs and the very lows. It's almost like it's like a mental disorder. I can't think of the name, but he's saying that usually some people that have the highs and the lows, they actually are the ones that need medical assistance or like a healthcare provider to help them with kind of taking those highs and lows and making them more manageable, he's saying. So it is, so the 3 years, he's like, he doesn't want people to get this idea that it's going to be like a complete shit show for 3 years. What's happening is that your physical cannot constantly be in this rocket mode. So it's going to be up and down. But depending on the mental state of somebody, those ups and downs are going to be very like really extreme, right? He says, because we need to, he doesn't know how to say this, because we need to start talking about mental health so it's not such a secret, so it's not just like this, you know, put it under the rug, let's act normal thing, really needs to come out in the open. So too does the dark night of the soul. But that doesn't mean somebody has to go to their physician and say, you know, I'm feeling like I'm in a dark night of the soul. It's at some point, it has to be kind of humanized and put in a way that, okay, you go to your physician, you're saying, I'm really, really struggling with life and I need help and I need somebody to talk to. Need to bring it all out in the open. He says what tends to happen is that when people are very spiritually inclined, they attach everything to their spiritual awakening. But he said, you have to remember, you're still a person on this planet. And your human aspect needs just as much care as your spiritual aspect. So when you're still walking around as a human being, you still need to use those the human help, he says, but it's a holistic view. So you can go to like a physician to help with your mental, you know, the mental state, while also doing things to encourage your spiritual growth. And he's saying that is like that's the ultimate wisdom factor that will take somebody from the dark night of the soul into the he's saying like the awakening. He says, yeah, but it will just take one thing to set it off, one thing for the dominoes all to fall. He also wants to tread lightly on a certain thing that isn't mentioned with the dark night of the soul. And he's saying that it has to do with twin flame and soulmate. And he's saying that the dark night of the soul is very, very tethered. It's very tied to those soulmate twin flame relationships. Okay. he's saying with the soulmate part, there'll be a separation because where you're going, sometimes your soulmates can't go with you. And so, like, there's a pause, there's like a break where, this party has to go this way and this party has to go another. With the twin flame thing, the reason why people feel so intense with the twin flame thing is because the twin flame situation, relationship will actually kind of dive into these dark nights of the souls together, because they are flames, they are twin flame unions, right? So what a person is feeling when they're going through the dark night of the soul, the other person will feel as well. And it actually can be like a very not great situation because when you're really low, and it could just feed each other. And then there's two spiraling. He says if a human being has a twin flame and they're connected in spirit, the twin flame in spirit has to let the human go through the dark night of the soul and meet them on the other side. They're always walking really, really close beside you. However, the human needs to experience that without the influence of the twin flame connection. Even though the twin flame, he's like what he was saying earlier, they are sitting in the waiting room while you're having life-changing, life-saving surgery. And all they can do is wait in this waiting room for you to come out into recovery. And then they can join you at your bedside. He says, this whole dark night of the soul has been over-defined. He says, there's just been too much logic into it. But he says, what it really is diving for light. He's like, it's really, really diving deep. And he says it can be the loneliest part of a spiritual journey that somebody will come to. And if you're on a spiritual journey, at some point you will feel these dark nights happen, right? Because again, he's saying people live on a fault line, just like California lives on a fault line and people have that shakeup. So too does the human. The human lives on an individual fault line, and once in a while it's going to shake up, and you are going to, if you're in touch with your spiritual nature, it is going to shake things up. Because if you're in touch with your spiritual nature, whether or not you're being dragged kicking and screaming, or else you're willingly going, you will have those moments where you really have to dive into yourself, dive deep to uncover that light. He's saying that religion is a very, very, very beautiful thing on this planet. Again, religion has been overly defined. But he's saying that sometimes the dark night in religion is confused with other situations. The dark night that people are feeling sometimes have labels put on it that, they're going through hell, or they've been sinning too much, or, I don't know, they broke a commandment. He's just kind of really making light of it. But so it's taken really at surface level, like it's just taken very literally, when what's disregarded is what these people are actually feeling. And when you have a dark night of the soul, when you're finding yourself through religion, there is a lot of misinterpretation about what's really going on. He says, because the new age ideas are sometimes looked at as being sinful or dark, or evil, or whatever, right? So there's just like a really big communication between the mind and the spirit, like the brain and the spirit, in regards to these dark nights of the soul happening with people who are like very, very religious. And he says, you can't fix a dark night of the soul with rules of religion. He says, because to help support somebody through a dark night of the soul, it's not a one-way thing, it's a personal prescription. So he's saying, whereas prayer would work for one person, it would not work for another. He's saying he doesn't, I'm listening, the way Paul's talking right now is that he's kind of like, ugh, like I don't want to offend anybody, but I also just need to, say my bit. So he's like really hesitating with the words. And that when I'm getting really quiet is when I'm just trying to listen, but he's actually just pausing and thinking of what to say. He's like, this has been talked about for, it's been overly spoken of in spiritual circles as something that can, just go with the flow, just go with the flow. And when you say go with the flow to somebody who is in the throes of being propelled into another state of vibration, there's no flow there. It's just chaos. And so he does not want to tell people to go with the flow. He's like, he also would like to put out there that if somebody's getting the advice that, this is just going to stick around for a really long time, so get used to it. He's like, that's not helpful either. He's like, when you're in the throes of healing chaos, it's literally one step in front of the other. He says, ask yourself, what step can I do next? What step can I move forward with? Just one step. What step? What step? He's like, think of divers that go really, really deep down into the waters. He's saying they have to resurface like bit by bit. If they resurface all at once, they could seriously hurt themselves. And it's the same with diving for light, diving for self. You have to kind of be like bit by bit. So instead of looking at the mountain to climb, he's saying it's actually like, how am I going to climb out of the pit that I find myself in? And it's strategizing bit by bit. It's literally like he's showing me somebody in a well and they're trapped in a well with like brick around. And he's like, literally, what brick am I going to try to grasp to climb out of this hole that I find myself in? He says, people need to give themselves more of a break, especially the people who are trying to connect with their spirituality. He says, when people sometimes enter the game of spirituality, they enter it believing that it's going to be like all of this blissful stuff. And he says, most times it is. But if you're connecting to spirit, oh, okay. He's like, so the humans here, the spirits here, right? The spirits here, the humans here, the spirits here, so it's like just a constant game of coming into balance with self, right? So the human is going to have when the spirit, so look, when the human's down here, the spirit's up here. We feel the human stuff down here. What's really happening is that you're being propelled with your spirit, right? So it's like it's constantly a leveling act until you've come into balance. And he says that's why there's this quickening happening, because that balance is actually just trying to even out quicker these days. He says he doesn't want to insult anybody by trying to throw a bunch of definitions out to them when they're just really struggling with trying to figure things out right now. He's showing me a person that is really, really frustrated right now, thinking that okay, like I started meditating, I started doing all of this, started doing yoga. And it just feels like crap. It just feels like crap. He's like, this person is being propelled into another existence where they cannot take what they want with them. He's also saying that if you're trying to support somebody through their dark night of the soul and they're really in the throes of this chaotic feeling in their life, you will not be able to say anything wrong or anything right. He's saying you won't be able to say the right thing because it is just such a chaotic mess in their mind that they will only pick and choose what they want to hear and they will disregard the things that they need to hear. So this is kind of like a situation where you're trying to support someone through a dark night of the soul, where you really have to let them just spew. And instead of either making it about yourself or giving them constructive criticism, giving them some sort of help, right? It's just, sometimes it's best to just listen. A lot of what people need when they're going through the dark nights of the souls or the voids is a listening ear. And a really good question to ask them, he's saying, is would you like me to offer you what I'm hearing, what I'm feeling? Can I suggest something? But be prepared that just like those rockets who are trying to take off into space, he's like, it's a very combustible, it's a very reactive situation. And there is a potential for these people to react. He's saying, let's talk about a woman giving birth. He says, as with like any sort of dark night of the soul, there are things like you're being propelled into another state of awareness, another state of existence. You are birthing another bit of yourself. He's like, so let's think about a woman who is giving birth. And he says, I have seen women giving birth. I have been in the room even after death with women giving birth. I have seen it. And he says, he's like, sorry, my daughter's doing laundry. There comes a point where she ain't listening to nothing. Don't touch her. Don't kiss her. Don't even do anything because she is so involved in birthing and the pain and the destruction that is creating within her that she doesn't want no part of nothing. She didn't want no love. She didn't want anything like that. He's saying inside is like this, that's what's happening with people when they're in the dark night as well, is that they are birthing another aspect of themselves. And so they don't want nothing with nothing. It is excruciating. It's constricting while you're breaking apart. It's everything. And there is no way in hell that you will be able to say anything that will make that better until that is all done, all birthed, and the bliss comes back. He's like, this is where the healing comes in. This is a very destructive time. However, it is a very healing time. And when these dark nights of the soul kind of, they're coming up from the deep and they're into the light again, it is going to take a little bit of time, he's saying, for these people to get their feet wet in the spiritual again. They'll never forget their spirit. They'll never forget their spiritual work. They'll never forget how much they have learned. However, to even want to do that again, to even want to get that back again, it's going to take some time. He's like, I have worked with Kim through many of her dark nights of the soul. And he says, I need to tread lightly. He says, because Kim's not going to come back to me or to the table right away. It's going to take her baby steps to get back into what she knew as a different person on a different level in a different way. He's saying, so he's using me as an example. He's like, when Kim's birthing something, there ain't no way in hell she's gonna let me help her with that. I have to wait in the waiting room. He's like, I've been told many times to get the hell out of the room she's birthing in. So he waits in the waiting room. And he's right. Like when I go into these dark nights of the soul, and they can either be little or they can be big, I'm not in any kind of mood to get any sort of advice. I'm not, and people will have the best of intentions and tell me stuff, and I will take it like completely the wrong way. And so it's just enough for me to work that out by myself without any sort of influence from any, friends, family, soulmate, twin flame, anything. I am the kind of person that needs to do that by themselves. And fortunately, him and I have learned the hard way that it's just best for him to wait in the waiting room while I go through the whole birth, or else he's going to get his face fucking ripped off. Like, I'm serious, because I have a really, really reactive temper when I'm in the throes of the dark night, and I will use any excuse to blame something that has nothing to do with me birthing or growing or transforming or whatever it is, right? He's like, distractions are good. Like, distractions are really good. Just like when a woman's giving birth, she has techniques to distract her from her pain. Distractions are good. So it's like, I, in the month of January, have had a really, it's been a crazy month. So what did I do? I went into my fiction writing to try to distract me so I wouldn't mentally go really, really deep into that depression, right? And so he's like, if you're going through a dark night, there's things that you can do that aren't destructive, that can take you away from, kind of taking the edge off. He's like, it's kind of taking like an aspirin for a headache, just kind of taking the edge off. So he's like, oh, okay. He's like, journaling wouldn't be a really great thing, because you're just probably going to write everything that you're feeling and just spiral in words. He's like, but binge watching a television show, reading, a book that takes you just away from spiritual, because he's saying when you're going through the dark night of the soul, you need to step away from trying to be engrossed in spirituality. When you're in the dark night of the soul, he's saying it is no use to try to grow spiritually, because your spirit is, and your physical body is going like this, trying to come into balance. It's going to be really difficult to connect. So while you're going through the dark night of the soul, to even try to connect is going to be frustrating. And it's just going to accumulate into this huge snowball effect. So he's like, when you're going through the dark night, he says, keep it light. Bring in as much light as you can. He's saying, heavy meditation. He said, this is not a prescription. He says, but for some people, heavy meditation won't work with the dark night of the soul. It just won't. So it's better to just be, and he's using a lot of tarot references. He's like, it's better to just be a four of swords energy, and just, wrap yourself in like a comfortable nest, and just be cocooned in that, darkness that you're feeling, and rest. Because, at nighttime, we get into bed and we rest. And sometimes that dark night of the soul is like, maybe sometimes it's manifesting as depression. And so that's deep rest, right? You need deep rest. So it's time to get that deep rest. Okay, so sometimes it manifests in depression. Sometimes it manifests in like physical illness, physical pains. He's saying that sometimes it will manifest as separation from relationships, the loss of a job, financial instability. And all of these things, he says, are situations that people need to learn from in that moment, learn lessons from in that moment. He says, they're hard lessons to learn. And that's why he says that he wanted to come in today, not to define the dark night of the soul, but to actually give support for the people who are in the throes of it right now. Okay, he's saying that there's like a lot of 3-year patterns happening right now. Okay, the 7-year patterns were kind of over. Give me a year. It's 2012, these 7-year cycles. Now they're kind of in 3-year cycles. So there are people that are just kind of getting out of a 3-year cycle, and then there are people that are just coming into a 3-year cycle. He says he wants to say again, it needs to be talked about in a way that people won't attribute it to woo-woo. Mental health of the human being is extremely important, but it's still, he says, it's still being, shoved, swept under the rug. And he says there's a lot of people that would prefer to have what they're feeling being swept under the rug. He doesn't blame people for wanting to stick their heads in the sand and just ignore their personal rocket ship, their personal earthquakes, until like everything's settled, right? That works for them. He's like, they will still come to their new version of themselves. They will still come to the new spirals that they're entering. It's just that they're deciding to take care of it in a different way than somebody else would. And there's no comparison because it is so personal. So he's like criticizing somebody for the way they're trying to handle themselves when they're feeling really low isn't helping at all. He says he's seeing way, way too much self-criticism. He's saying he's seeing way too much constructive criticism. This is what you should do. You should do this. You should do that. He's like, there's not a lot of active listening to these people. There's a lot of passive listening, like, oh yeah, here we go again. Yeah, okay, yeah, yeah. Active listening is engaged. Active listening is not only using the ears, it's using the eyes, the heart, and the mind to connect with people that need your light. Okay. He wants to use me as an example. So lately I've been starting to light a candle during meditation and say, I dedicate this light to all sentient beings that need light and love in their life. He's like, that's a part of active listening, offering yourselves without saying, trying to fix it for somebody, because you can't fix this for somebody. You can support them through it. And there's like a huge difference with that. Okay, he's saying like he just really wants to make sure that he doesn't want to come off as some sort of asshole. He says as much as he tries to return the phone calls, return the emails, he says he just can't say the right thing right now because he says he wishes he could say the right thing to these people that would make them feel better. But again, he can't say the right thing because sometimes it comes off as offensive. Sometimes it comes off as, they really, really wanted to hear something of him that they think would make it all better, but he can't lie to somebody just to put a Band-Aid solution on something. He's like, the dark night of the soul is real work. Like it's real work. And you just can't put a Band-Aid solution or contribute to some sort of fantasy that will make them, he said, make them spiral even more. Because if you say yes to a fantasy situation that they're, daydreaming up in their mind, and all of a sudden they find out it really isn't real and they're in a dark night, he's like, the world could become very, very dark. And now it's a 911 call, right? So he again wants to reiterate, I hear you. I feel you. I want to help you. But he says, heaven is right there with you. He's like, just like in the poem, the Footprints poem, usually you are being carried and helped and supported. And that's why you only see one set of footprints, is because they're not your footprints. You're actually being held in the arms of something much bigger to help you through these chaotic, earthquakey kind of times. So he says, that's all I really have. He says, my heart goes out to you. He says, he's been feeling it a lot lately. He says, things should get smoother around springtime. People will feel a lot lighter during springtime. So yeah. He says, I'll let Kim off the hook now, because it wasn't, he says, and I agree with him, like, it wasn't easy to get me to sit down today. Like, I've been avoiding this because January has been like just a complete crapshoot. And again, I'm like red again and whatever. So he says, I love you all. He says, I want the best for you all. Sometimes the best takes a little bit of work, right? So even the easy road has forks in it. Even the easy roads has deviation, so he's not going to tell you guys to go with the flow, because that would not be fair. He's like, but he understands. He completely understands. So he's like, that's it. That's all I got. He's like, Kim's got to cook supper now. So I have to cook some supper now. So I'm going to let you go. It's been great to connect with you. Like I said in Heath's video, like, I don't have a schedule for these, but I will try to connect as much as I can, channel as much as I can. But yeah, like, I wouldn't call January like a dark night by any means. However, it has taken me like a real big effort to even want to sit down and try to channel again. And when I had my car accident, it's like, it's funny because when I got rear-ended, probably 2 minutes before I saw that, I saw the number that every time it shows up, I see Paul around. And so I saw it on a license plate, and I was like, oh, hey, Paul. Paul, and like schwack, buddy hit me. And my daughter got hurt and my son got hurt, and I was like, really and that just started it all. So yeah, he's like, I've had to tread very lightly. He's like, what people don't always know is that soulmates and twin flames, a lot of their karma is connected in ways that seem pretty unfair, he's saying. So it's like, he couldn't warn me that something was about to happen, but he could tell me that he was around when something was about to happen. So yeah, it's just, it is what it is, right? So I'm actually going to let you guys go now. I'm going to put this video together and put it up. Again, this isn't to minimize anything that people are going through. It's, the table is just a means of support for you guys, right? So, however, Paul's like, there's a lot of people who are stuck in a victim mentality. And he's like, the dark night of the soul isn't meant to create a victim. He's saying it's meant to create a firework, like just an explosion of beautiful light, and all those sparks fly and feed to others who need light in their life as well. So he's like, you're never a victim of anything. He just, you're never, ever, ever a victim of anything. He's like, you're a hero of everything. So he'd like to end with that. So I'm going to end it there. And if you guys are interested in the, the 3 things that I have, I did a video previous, and you can take a look at that. And with that, I will see you later. I'll see you next time. It was great to connect, and yeah, hopefully we'll connect again soon. Ciao.